Good evening and welcome to Late Night Science. You have found your way into a quiet space, a place where science and wonder meet beneath the slow turning of the stars. Before we begin, I'd love to know, where are you listening from tonight? Somewhere in the noise of a city or in the silence of a darkened room? Wherever you are, I invite you to let your shoulders sink, to let your breath move in its own rhythm, and to join me on this calm exploration of the future of our species. If you find peace in these journeys, you are always welcome to stay, to return, and to let this become part of your night. We begin with a flame, a fragile shimmer in the dark, a story that stretches back through millennia across unbroken chains of survival, adaptation, and chance. In the hush of deep time, humanity appears as nothing more than a flicker, a small pulse of firelight in the endless dark of the universe. And yet, within that flicker, entire worlds bloom. Caves become cities. Languages unfold like wings. Ideas are carried like sparks from one generation to the next, until they illuminate whole continents. From the outside, we are a brief moment. From the inside, we are everything we know. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine the arc of human history as a candle burning in a vast cavern. In its glow, the walls reveal handprints painted thousands of years ago by ancestors whose names are forgotten, but whose gestures remain. The flame moves forward in time and the walls shift, pyramids rising from the sand, temples climbing into the clouds, ships carried by the wind to distant horizons. The flame flickers, fragile yet determined, casting light across inventions, revolutions, dreams and devastations. And now that same flame rests in our hands. It is not the fire of survival alone, but of curiosity, of questions too large to extinguish. Yet even as we look back on this journey, we cannot help but feel its brevity. The Earth has orbited the Sun more than 4 billion times, and only for the last 200,000 of those orbits have beings like us stood here, asking what it means to exist. A flicker against the backdrop of cosmic history. Dinosaurs reigned for hundreds of millions of years, while we have barely taken our first breath. And still we imagine futures. Still we dare to believe this small flame can endure. That is what makes this question so powerful and so unsettling. What comes after us? If evolution is a story written not in words but in bones and genes, then we are only a chapter. Perhaps not even a full chapter, just a page or a single paragraph. The silence of time waits before us, just as it stretches endlessly behind. And in that silence, we can only wonder, what shape will the next flicker take? For evolution has always been restless. It is not content to let a species stand still. The fish that first climbed to land, the mammals that rose after the fall of the great reptiles, the primates that reached for fruit and, in reaching, changed the structure of their hands. All of these were flickers before us, and each believed, if belief were possible, that they were the center of the story. We are no different. We tell ourselves that our intelligence, our technology, our cities, and our art set us apart, and in some ways they do. But evolution has no final form. The flame is always in motion, and so here we stand, gazing both backward and forward at once. Backward, we see the trails of ash, the echoes of ancestors who shaped stone into blades and whispered stories around fires. Forward, we see only shadow, a horizon lit by questions rather than answers. What if the human we know today is only the beginning? What if our descendants are not shaped by nature alone, but by their own designs? What if the flicker grows into something we can barely recognize? This thought can bring comfort or unease. To some, the idea that humanity might change feels like a loss. They long to believe that who we are now is sacred, a pinnacle. To others, the possibility of transformation is exhilarating, a promise that our story is only beginning. Both feelings are true, and both belong in this quiet reflection. Evolution does not ask our permission, It moves as rivers move, slowly carving valleys, sometimes shifting overnight, always flowing forward. And we are carried in its current, whether we resist or embrace it. But here is the wonder. Unlike any species before us, we can see the current. We can name it, study it, dream about where it might lead. We hold the flame not only as recipients of the past, but as participants in the shaping of what comes next. That is what makes this moment so rare, so fragile, so profound. We are not simply waiting for the future of evolution. We are beginning to create it. And yet, in this very act of creation, we must ask, what story are we writing? Are we fanning the flame toward brilliance or toward ruin? Are we preparing a world for descendants who will thank us or curse us? The flicker is fragile. It must be tended with care, so let us slow down and breathe with this thought. Let us stand in the silence of time, feeling the weight of both past and future. We are a flicker in the dark, but flickers can spread. Sparks can leap from one life to the next, shaping not only survival, but meaning, and perhaps that is the true secret of human evolution, that it has never been about the body alone, but about the dreamer inside the body, about imagination, vision, and story, about the ways we lift our eyes from stone to stars, and in doing so reshape ourselves. As we drift forward, we will step into this idea more fully. From the bones of the past to the dreams of tomorrow, we will see how imagination itself has been a kind of evolution, guiding hands and shaping minds. For maybe survival was never enough. Maybe we were always reaching for something more, and so I leave you with this question. If we are a flicker in the dark, then what dream will that flicker ignite next? Imagine for a moment the stillness of an ancient cave. The air is damp, carrying the scent of earth and ash. A small fire glows in the center, its smoke curling toward the stone ceiling. On the walls, painted with ochre and charcoal, animals move, bison, horses, mammoths, etched in flowing lines that seem alive even in silence. Beside the fire, a child stares at those walls, their eyes widening with the wonder of a story told not in words but in images. The body that kneels by the fire is human, but so too is the dream that spills across the rock. Both are products of evolution. Both are the traces of change. When we think of evolution, it is tempting to imagine only bones, the jaw that grew smaller, the pelvis that reshaped for walking upright, the skull that expanded to hold a restless brain. These bones tell stories, silent records of survival and adaptation. Yet, alongside the bones, something else evolved, a hidden language of symbols, imagination, and dreams. The hand that once struck stone against stone to make a blade eventually struck stone against cave wall to leave a mark. The line between survival and meaning blurred. Evolution had given us not just a body capable of surviving, but a mind capable of imagining. Consider the first stone tool. To shape it, an ancestor had to imagine its use before it existed. That small leap, the ability to see into a possible future, was itself a kind of mutation, not in genes, but in thought. The dream preceded the tool, and once the tool existed, it reshaped the dreamer. In this way, imagination and biology became partners. Each change in the body allowed for new ways of seeing the world, and each new way of seeing the world called forth new changes in the body. From bones to dreams, evolution was never linear. It was more like a weaving, threads of flesh and threads of story crossing again and again, forming a tapestry that carried both survival and wonder. The body gave the dream voice, and the dream in turn sculpted the body. The expansion of the human skull is not only the story of increased brain size, it is the story of the cave paintings, of rituals, of songs, of whispers passed around firelight. Biology and imagination evolved together, inseparably intertwined. And yet, what is imagination if not a survival tool of a different kind? To imagine is to prepare for the unknown, to rehearse possibilities, to create in the mind what the world has not yet demanded. When hunters painted animals on cave walls, they may have been rehearsing the chase, practicing success through vision before action. When stories were told under the stars, they carried lessons across generations, warnings wrapped in myth, memory shaped into song. Imagination became a second skeleton, invisible yet essential, holding humanity upright in ways no bone ever could. Think of the human hand. Its evolution allowed us to grasp, to carve, to build. But it also allowed us to paint, to write, to gesture. A hand can cradle a child, sharpen a spear, or sketch a constellation in the air. The hand is bone, tendon, and muscle. But it is also metaphor, an instrument of the dreaming mind. Likewise, the voice box evolved to shape air into sound. That sound became language. Language became story. And story became a kind of DNA of culture, transmitting knowledge not through cells, but through words. Survival was never just about the fittest body. It was about the most imaginative story, the tribe that could tell of where the rivers flowed, of when the herds would pass, of which plants could heal, outlived the tribe that did not. The dream was not decoration. It was instruction. It carried memory across time. And in this way, imagination became as critical to survival as fire or shelter. Even today, you carry both bones and dreams within you. The bones connect you to every ancestor who walked upright, who hunted, who bore children, who adapted. They are the silent architecture of evolution, holding you in place. But within your skull is also a theater of images, a space where you can picture what is not present, what has not yet happened. You dream futures the body cannot yet touch. This capacity, this inner horizon, has always shaped what comes next. Think of agriculture. Before seeds were sown in fields, they were sown in imagination. Someone looked at the scattering of grain and wondered, what if? What if we planted them here where we could tend them? That single dream reshaped the body. Diets changed, jaws shifted, bones reflected new patterns of labor. Cities rose from fields, and human society itself restructured around an idea that began in imagination. Dreams remade bones or consider flight. For most of human history, we watched birds trace patterns across the sky, wondering what it would be to join them. The body was not made for wings. And yet, by imagining, we created machines that carried us into the air, and eventually beyond the atmosphere itself. Evolution had shaped bodies, but imagination shaped futures those bodies could never reach alone. This is why bones and dreams cannot be separated. Biology provides the canvas, but imagination paints upon it, and sometimes even stretches the canvas wider. The story of human evolution is not only one of mutations and natural selection. It is also the story of metaphors, of visions, of myths. A cave painting is as evolutionary as a fossil. A poem is as much a trace of survival as a bone. And as we stand here now, looking toward the uncertain future, it becomes clear that this partnership will continue. Our biology will change, yes, through medicine, technology, and time. But our dreams, our visions of what might be, will always walk alongside. For it is imagination that whispers what is possible, and the body that listens, slowly reshaping itself in response. But beneath these dreams, beneath the hand that paints, beneath the voice that tells stories, lies a deeper mystery. What makes this possible? What allows the body to change, the mind to expand, the dream to take form? To answer, we must move from caves and fields into the hidden machinery of life itself, down into the quiet ticking of molecules, the silent gears that turn within every cell. For there, in the strands of DNA, the clockwork of genes keeps time, carrying whispers of both ancestry and possibility. And so let us drift inward, into the molecular forge where mutations and accidents shape destinies. For even the smallest change may ripple outward into futures unimaginable. Beneath the surface of skin, beneath the strength of muscle and the curve of bone, a hidden engine hums in silence. You cannot feel it, though it shapes your every breath. You cannot see it, though it shines in every cell. It is the machinery of DNA, the quiet clockwork of life itself. While you dream, while you move through your days, it ticks relentlessly, copying, folding, repairing, sometimes faltering, always shaping. Within this molecular forge lies the entire archive of your ancestry and the uncertain sketches of your tomorrow. Imagine, if you will, a library so vast that every page is written in only 4 letters. A, C, G, T, 4 symbols, repeated and recombined in sequences billions of characters long. This library rests inside you, coiled into spirals that fold upon themselves like an ancient script. Each letter, each fragment of code, does not exist in isolation. Together they orchestrate the construction of bodies, the rhythms of life, the choreography of growth, repair, and decay. DNA is less a static text and more a living symphony, notes endlessly replayed, sometimes slightly altered, always flowing into the next measure. And yet this clockwork is not perfect. Every time it turns, every time a cell divides, there is a chance of error. A miscopied letter, a misplaced sequence, a slip in the spiral. Most of these mistakes are harmless, silent echoes that leave no trace. Some are harmful, leading to sickness, fragility, or premature endings. But a rare few are the sparks of something new. A thicker bone, a sharper mind, a tolerance for altitude or resistance to disease. The smallest change in the script may ripple outward into futures no ancestor could have imagined. This is the paradox of the gene. It is both precise and imperfect. It must copy itself with astonishing fidelity, for life cannot endure chaos. But it must also allow space for error, for mutation, for novelty. Without error, there would be no change. And without change, no evolution. We exist because of these quiet accidents, because the clockwork is not flawless. The human story is not written in perfection, but in the delicate balance between order and mistake. Consider the color of your eyes. Behind their hue is a series of genetic variations, mutations carried through countless generations. Once these changes meant nothing. In time, they became distinguishing traits woven into the diversity of human faces. Or think of lactose tolerance, the ability of some humans to digest milk into adulthood. For most of history, this was impossible. The gene that allowed it arose by chance, and when humans began to herd animals and drink their milk, this accident became a profound advantage. Entire cultures were shaped around this shift. One small mutation, one quiet alteration in the code, and the trajectory of history shifted. In this way, the body is a palimpsest, a manuscript written and rewritten by countless invisible hands. Every organ, every trait, every subtle detail carries whispers of the past, fossils of ancient mutations, echoes of survival. The human genome is not a perfect design, but a patchwork quilt stitched together over eons, each square telling a story of trial, error, and endurance. And yet, as you sit here listening, it is easy to forget this hidden labor. The DNA does not announce itself. It is silent, tucked away within the nucleus of each cell, endlessly at work. The body you inhabit is a cathedral of these cells, each one guided by the same library, the same ancient song. Within their walls, enzymes and proteins move like careful artisans, reading the script, repairing mistakes, ensuring that life continues one heartbeat longer. But let us lean closer into the intimacy of scale. A mutation does not begin as destiny. It begins as the smallest misstep, a flicker at the level of atoms. And yet, amplified over generations, it may become a defining feature of a species. The long neck of the giraffe, the wings of the butterfly, the opposable thumb of a primate. Each is a note first played as error, then repeated, tested, refined by time until it became the new normal. What was once anomaly becomes necessity. What was once chance becomes beauty. And this is where awe enters. For if we trace back far enough, the same logic applies to ourselves. Somewhere in deep prehistory, an ancestor carried a slight mutation that allowed for a larger brain case. The change may have been imperceptible at first, but over generations it opened the possibility of language, memory, imagination. A tiny alteration in code became the foundation for stories, art, philosophy, love. Out of the machinery of molecules, entire civilizations eventually rose. Can you feel the wonder in that? That in the most silent workings of the cell, entire worlds were already waiting? Of course, the machinery does not only create wonders, it creates suffering too. The same genetic shifts that allow for novelty may also burden families with diseases, with frailty, with bodies that betray them too soon. Evolution has no morality. It does not ask what is fair. It does not ask what is kind. It simply turns and weaves and carries on. To live is to inherit both gifts and wounds from the quiet clockwork within. And yet, there is something profoundly beautiful in this impartiality. For it reminds us that we are not separate from nature's processes, we are born of them. Every joy, every sorrow, every act of imagination or love rests upon the same molecular stage. The DNA does not care whether we build cities or paint caves, whether we worship gods or study galaxies, and yet it makes all of these things possible. Out of the indifference of molecules comes the brilliance of meaning. Still, we cannot help but ask, what next? If our bodies are the outcome of countless genetic accidents, then what accidents lie ahead? What new mutations are being written in secret tonight, in the cells of children not yet born, in the seeds of generations to come? What traits, unimagined, might one day define the descendants of humanity? For evolution is not a tidy tale. It is not written with neat lines or predictable chapters. It is a tapestry woven with chance, with mistakes that become miracles. Even as we marvel at the machinery, we must remember the role of chaos, the accidents that shape beauty. To understand what is to come, we must learn to see error not only as flaw, but as possibility. And so as we step out of the molecular forge and back into the wider frame of life, let us carry this thought. Perhaps the most astonishing forms are born not from design, but from imperfection. The question then is this: what new accidents of beauty wait silently in tomorrow's code, ready to emerge and change the story again? If you look closely at the story of life, you will notice that it is rarely neat. It does not move with the precision of a machine or the symmetry of a perfect design. Instead, it stumbles, it experiments, it meanders. It is as if life is a weaver working in dim light, sometimes tangling threads, sometimes dropping stitches, sometimes knotting fibers where they do not seem to belong. And yet, when we step back, what emerges from these accidents is not only survival, but beauty. Consider the curve of the human spine. It is not flawless. To stand upright has given us balance and reach, the freedom of hands unburdened by walking. But this same curve also makes us vulnerable to pain, strain, injury. The design is imperfect, but within the imperfection lies the signature of transition. The spine is a compromise between quadruped past and bipedal present. A flaw perhaps, but one that made possible everything else: language, tools, art, and the very act of you standing here, listening, breathing. Out of imbalance came possibility, or think of language itself. A strange accident of anatomy gave us a larynx that dropped lower in the throat, opening the range of sounds we could produce. This adaptation came at a cost, the risk of choking, a vulnerability other animals are spared. But in that danger, a new power was born, the ability to shape air into words, to give voice to thought, to bind communities together with shared meaning. Beauty born from risk, poetry carved out of peril. It is the same with vision. The human eye is riddled with imperfections, blind spots, fragile tissue, a tendency toward degeneration. And yet, despite these flaws, or perhaps because of the compromises they represent, we see the world with astonishing depth and subtlety. We see not just shapes and light, but beauty itself. The play of shadow across mountains, the shimmer of stars, the quiet glow of fire in the night. An organ imperfect in its structure, perfect in its gift. Again and again, life shows us this paradox. What we call mistakes become doorways. What we call flaws become opportunities. Mutation is not a sculptor carving with precision, but a storm scattering seeds. Some fall into soil and vanish. Some grow wild and tangled, and a few bloom into something extraordinary. Beauty is not the absence of error. It is the flowering of error into form. Even our very faces carry this truth. The diversity of human features, the wide spectrum of skin tones, the textures of hair, the shapes of noses and jaws, all are the result of countless genetic variations. Many of them arising by chance. And yet what emerges from this randomness is a canvas of beauty more varied than any artist could have designed. Beauty is not uniform, not a singular perfection, but a chorus of differences, each voice shaped by accident, by time, by circumstance. There is comfort in this realization, for it suggests that life does not demand flawlessness in order to create wonder. It suggests that our scars, our asymmetries, our irregularities are not signs of failure, but part of the same evolutionary story that shaped the stars of our eyes and the rhythm of our voices. If beauty is born of accident, then perhaps we too are already beautiful in our unfinishedness. And if the past reveals this truth, what of the future? What new accidents of beauty might tomorrow hold? Imagine children born in colonies beyond Earth, their bodies slowly shaped by gravity weaker than our own. They may grow taller, more fragile in bone, yet perhaps more graceful in movement. Imagine generations living beneath the seas in floating habitats, their lungs and muscles adapting to a new relationship with pressure and breath. Imagine minds altered by the blending of biology and machine, perceiving colors and patterns invisible to us, weaving beauty from dimensions we cannot yet see. These possibilities are not designs waiting in blueprints. They are accidents waiting to be recognized as gifts. For if evolution teaches us anything, it is that the most profound transformations come not from control, but from chance that later reveals itself as opportunity. And yet as humans, we struggle with this idea. We prefer order to chaos, intention to accident. We tell ourselves that beauty must be deliberate, crafted, sculpted with purpose. But the truth whispers differently. The curve of the spine, the peril of the voice, the imperfection of the eye, all remind us that life's loveliness is not the product of control, but of surrender. Beauty is what happens when accident is allowed to become form. So tonight, as you rest in this thought, consider the randomness within you, the millions of tiny variations that shaped your body, your mind, your very existence. Consider that the spark of your imagination, the shape of your smile, the sound of your voice, all emerged from countless accidents, each carried through time until it became you. You are not neat. You are not perfect. You are something far rarer, an accident of beauty. And perhaps this is the secret hope buried in evolution, that tomorrow too will hold accidents worth cherishing, that in the unplanned, in the unpredicted, in the unexpected, something extraordinary will bloom.
A new kind of art, a new way of thinking, a new form of love.
For if the past is any guide, then the next horizon will not be flawless. It will be surprising, strange, and alive with possibility. But as we look to that horizon, a subtle shift begins. For unlike the creatures who came before us, we are no longer only passengers on this river of chance. We have begun to step into the current with our own hands, reshaping it, redirecting it, imagining not only what accidents may come, but what designs we might create. We stand at the threshold where evolution itself bends beneath our choices. And so the question becomes, when accident gives way to intention, what path will we choose? What story will we write into our bones, our voices, our dreams? There is a moment in the story of life when something subtle shifts. For countless ages, creatures rise and fall by the will of their environment. Climate, predators, famine, and disease shape them, mold them, select who continues and who disappears. Life is a dialogue where nature speaks and the species answer with adaptation. But then, almost imperceptibly at first, one lineage begins to answer differently. Rather than simply yielding to the sculpting hand of the world, it learns to shape the world in return.
That lineage is ours.
That shift is the human threshold. Imagine the first spark of fire cupped between trembling hands. At first it is only warmth, a fragile shield against the dark. But with it, something profound takes place. Fire does not change our bones, but it changes our possibilities. It allows us to cook, to preserve, to gather at night around a circle of light and share stories. It bends time itself, extending the day into the hours of darkness, stretching imagination beyond the confines of sunlight. Fire is not an adaptation etched into the body, it is a choice etched into the world. From there, the steps come one after another, each echoing louder than the last. The seed pressed into soil becomes agriculture, and with it, villages, cities, civilizations. No longer must we scatter with the seasons. We begin to anchor ourselves, to bend rivers, to cultivate abundance. The field and the plough are not organs of the body, yet they are organs of destiny. They transform the rhythm of life, allowing us to flourish in numbers far beyond what the forests and plains alone could sustain. Writing follows, delicate marks pressed into clay, carved into stone, painted onto parchment. With writing, memory itself is no longer bound to fragile flesh. We store thought outside the mind, giving it endurance beyond death. Words carry across centuries, whispering to those not yet born. In this way, knowledge becomes cumulative, no longer reinvented with each generation, but built layer upon layer, like bricks rising into towers. Writing is not evolution in the body, but evolution in the fabric of culture. Each threshold deepens the divide between simple adaptation and deliberate direction. Fire, agriculture, writing. Each one is less about nature shaping us and more about us shaping nature. We alter landscapes, reroute rivers, domesticate animals, and eventually even shape one another. We become architects in a way no other creature has achieved. And as the centuries pass, the pace quickens. Where once the changes unfolded over millennia, now they arrive in decades, in years, sometimes in moments. Yet it is not only invention that defines this threshold, it is awareness. Other species build, communicate, collaborate. Bees craft hives, whales sing across oceans, elephants mourn their dead. But humans carry a self-consciousness that adds a new dimension, the ability to step back, to recognize, to ask not only what is, but what might be. This is where the threshold deepens into something irreversible. For when a species can imagine futures, it can also choose them. You can feel this weight in your own life. The tools you use daily are not accidents of biology, but extensions of intention. The phone glowing in your hand, the food arriving from fields you will never see, the light filling your room. All are choices layered upon choices, stretching back to that first, trembling flame. You are not only a product of evolution, you are a participant in directing it, but thresholds are never without risk. Fire can warm, but it can also burn forests to ash. Agriculture can feed millions, but it can also erode soil and fracture ecosystems. Writing can preserve wisdom, but it can also carry lies across centuries. Every choice we make reshapes not only the world outside us, but also the world within us. For as we mold the environment, we mold the conditions that mold us in return. This is where the human threshold reveals its paradox. We step into the role of shaper, yet remain shaped. We design cities, and those cities in turn design our habits, our desires, our very concept of time. We cultivate crops, and the diet they provide changes our bodies, our teeth, our microbiomes. We invent machines, and soon our lives begin to move at the pace of machines, rather than the pace of nature. What we think of as control is always entangled with influence, always balanced by unintended consequence. And still, the threshold calls us forward. For once we taste this power, we cannot relinquish it. To imagine is to move, to discover is to transform. We stand now in a moment as profound as the first fire, as the first seed pressed into soil. But this time, the threshold is not defined by a single invention. It is defined by acceleration itself. We are no longer simply shaping tools, we are shaping futures at a speed that leaves little space for reflection. So the question grows urgent. What does it mean to choose the path of our own becoming? When we alter the climate with our industry, when we edit genes in the quiet of laboratories, when we weave intelligence into the circuits of machines, are we expanding beauty or narrowing it? Are we stepping into mastery or into dependence? Perhaps both. Perhaps thresholds are always both promise and peril. And yet, in the midst of this uncertainty, there is wonder. For in shaping the world, we have also shaped new forms of imagination. A mind that can hold the memory of stars, that can map the depths of oceans, that can envision futures still unborn. This is the harvest of thresholds crossed. It is not perfection, not completion, but a widening horizon. As you drift in this thought, imagine again the fire in trembling hands. Imagine the first seed planted, the first mark pressed into clay. Each was a threshold, small at first, vast in consequence. And now imagine the choices before us, genomes waiting to be edited, algorithms waiting to be trained, planets waiting to be reached. These, too, are thresholds, and we stand at the edge of them. But perhaps this time, the tools we shape are not only tools. They begin to resemble something deeper. They are not merely instruments we hold, they are silent architects of our futures, whispering into the blueprint of evolution itself. For the next great threshold may not be fire or writing or agriculture, but glass, steel, code, and silicon entwining with our very being. And so we must ask, as we step forward, do we still guide the architects we create, or do they begin to guide us? There was a time when tools were extensions of the hand, a stone blade sharpened for the hunt, a hammer to build a shelter, a wheel to carry burdens. They were companions, yes, but external ones, objects you could put down, forget, leave behind. Yet slowly, quietly, the role of tools shifted. They ceased to be mere helpers and became something subtler, something deeper, silent architects reshaping not only the world outside us, but the architecture within us, glass, steel, code, silicon. At first they seem inert, lifeless. Yet look closely, and you see how they alter us. A skyscraper is not just steel rising into the sky, it is a redefinition of space, a rearrangement of how we gather, how we dream. A book is not just ink on paper, but a reconfiguration of memory, a shaping of thought itself. A circuit humming on a board is not just electricity, but the silent whisper of a mind beginning to coalesce outside the body. Each material carries with it a kind of instruction, an unspoken blueprint. Glass teaches us to see differently, through windows, across oceans, through microscopes, through telescopes. Steel teaches us to build upward, to imagine height as possibility. Code teaches us to think in logic, in systems, in patterns that ripple through every choice we make. Silicon teaches us speed, computation at a rhythm no neuron alone could match. Together these materials are not passive. They are voices in the dialogue of evolution, whispering their influence into what we become. And here lies the quiet revelation. We are no longer only born, we are being designed. Consider the glasses resting on a face. They are simple, fragile, transparent, yet with them sight is altered. A weakness of the body is overcome, and in overcoming it, life extends into new possibilities. The same with vaccines, with surgery, with medicine. Step by step, we are not merely adapting to nature's conditions, we are drafting new conditions for ourselves. Think of the city. Its architecture shapes not only how we live, but how we think. A person raised among skyscrapers and neon has a different rhythm of mind than one raised among fields and rivers. The city itself becomes an evolutionary force, selecting for new behaviors, faster decision-making, higher tolerance for noise, sharper attention to signals amid chaos. Even before we speak of chips implanted in the brain, technology has already been writing itself into us. What makes this moment different is acceleration. The loom of technology has quickened its weave. Where once tools changed slowly, now they evolve with breathtaking speed, doubling, tripling, reinventing within decades. And with each reinvention, they do not simply serve us, they sculpt us. The wristwatch subtly reorganizes time in our minds. The smartphone alters memory, attention, even posture. Social networks reshape the way communities form, dissolve, and reform. We believe we designed them, yet in truth they return the gesture, shaping us in turn. There is a haunting irony here. For millions of years, our ancestors were molded by climate, by hunger, by the slow chisel of environment. Now we live within environments of our own making, and it is they that mold us. The architect's draft is no longer drawn by rivers or forests, but by fiber optics, algorithms, and glowing screens. Technology is not outside us, it is within the conditions of our becoming, and in this recognition lies awe, but also unease. If we are being designed, who holds the pen? Is it the engineer writing lines of code? The architect drawing glass towers? The unseen hand of markets, of collective choices, of billions of individuals tapping on keys and swiping on screens? Or is it something stranger still, a collaboration between human intention and technological momentum, where neither side fully controls the other? You can feel this in the quiet details of your own day. The way your phone reaches for you with a vibration, the way your schedule bends around invisible clocks, the way your thoughts sometimes carry the cadence of the machine. The boundary between choice and design blurs. We tell ourselves we are free, yet the architectures we live within whisper boundaries, possibilities, desires. Technology is no longer only a tool we wield, it is a habitat we inhabit, and, like any habitat, it selects. It rewards certain traits: speed over slowness, connection over solitude, efficiency over contemplation. It asks us to adapt to its pace, its rhythm, its demands. In doing so, it nudges the trajectory of evolution itself. The body may not change immediately, but the patterns of survival shift, and with them, over time, the body follows. Already, children are growing with muscles tuned to keyboards and eyes adapted to glowing screens. Already, our nervous systems are stretched by constant notifications, our dopamine pathways sculpted by digital rewards. This is the silent architecture of evolution, shaping without fanfare, designing without blueprints. And yet, beneath the unease there is wonder. For these architectures also expand us. They allow us to see galaxies once invisible, to peer into cells, to communicate across continents in an instant. They allow us to imagine futures not bound by the accidents of flesh alone. The architect is not cruel nor kind, it simply builds, and in its building we find new forms of being. But there is a threshold waiting just beyond this. For as long as technology shapes us from the outside, we can still pretend it is separate. We can set down the book, unplug the device, step away from the tower. Yet the next stage is different. The next stage enters the body directly. Neural implants, prosthetic limbs, artificial senses, all merging with flesh. It is the moment when the architect ceases to draw from without and begins to draw from within. And so the question unfolds like a shadow at the edge of thought. When technology is no longer tool, no longer even environment, but integrated into the very circuits of our bodies, what do we become? Do we remain human, merely extended by our creations? Or do we cross a new threshold into something else entirely, something we have no word for yet? Perhaps, in truth, we are already crossing. Perhaps each pacemaker, each cochlear implant, each artificial joint is a step into that liminal zone where biology and machine meet. Perhaps each of us is already a hybrid, carrying not only the code of DNA but also the codes of silicon, steel, and electricity. The architects are not only silent, they are intimate, already dwelling within us. And so we drift toward the next chapter of our becoming, one written not only in bone and blood, but in circuits and code. The lines blur, the definitions soften, and the threshold beckons. The silent architects have brought us here. What waits ahead is the mingling of flesh and circuit. There was once a clean line between body and tool. Flesh was soft, mortal, finite. Tools were hard, external, separate. The spear extended the reach of the arm, but it was not the arm. The wheel carried the body, but it was not the body. For millennia, we lived within that division, the organic and the mechanical, the living and the made. Yet now the boundary grows thin. The line shivers, bends, dissolves. Flesh and circuit are meeting, and in their mingling, a new form of humanity stirs. Consider the pacemaker, a small device, pulsing rhythm into the heart. It does not merely assist, it becomes part of the body's most intimate cadence. Without it, the heart falters. With it, the heart persists. Where then does the human end and the machine begin? The line blurs, and in that blur, something profound is revealed. Humanity is not fixed. It is porous, receptive, capable of entwining itself with what it creates. Prosthetic limbs extend this truth. A soldier who has lost a leg runs again with a blade of carbon fiber, springing with a force and efficiency unfamiliar to bone. A hand of metal and sensors responds to thought, grasping objects with precision. The prosthetic is not decoration. It is integration. It is both machine and self. And for the one who wears it, the boundary is irrelevant. The limb is lived as part of the body, no matter its material. Neural implants carry us further still. Electrodes nestle into brain tissue, capturing signals, translating thought into motion, into code, into light. With them, a paralyzed patient moves a cursor on a screen. With them, a thought can type a word, command a machine, perhaps one day speak across distance without a mouth. Here, flesh and circuit do not merely touch, they converse. Neurons whisper into silicon, and silicon replies. The brain extends itself outward, and in doing so changes the very meaning of communication. Artificial senses widen the horizon even more. A cochlear implant translates vibrations into electrical signals, granting sound to those born without it. A retinal implant converts light into pulses, weaving sight from pixels. These are not replications of nature, but inventions beyond it. Machines do not restore the body to a pure, original state. They create new states. They allow us to perceive in ways nature never strictly intended. Some experiments even stretch beyond repair into enhancement. Infrared vision, ultrasonic hearing, senses no ancestor of ours ever held. With them, we step not backward into restoration, but forward into augmentation. And so the question presses close. When flesh and circuit meet, do we remain human? Or do we become something else entirely? Perhaps the answer lies not in definitions, but in recognition. Humanity has never been a static category. We once lived in caves, painted on walls, walked barefoot across continents. We then clothed ourselves, built homes, forged cities. Were we less human in fur skins by a fire, more human in tailored suits beneath skyscrapers? Or is human not a fixed essence at all, but a moving threshold, a flame carried forward into new forms? The union of flesh and machine does not erase humanity, it continues it. It is another turn in the spiral of evolution, another layer added to the story. We are beings who adapt not only through genes, but through inventions. Our bodies are not sacred boundaries. They are canvases open to revision. We graft machines not to abandon ourselves, but to survive, to extend, to express. To be human may not mean to remain unchanged, but to carry the thread of selfhood through change, and yet caution lingers in the shadows, for each extension also poses a risk. Neural implants may open the mind to healing, but could they also open it to control? Prosthetics may restore independence, but could they create inequalities between the enhanced and the unenhanced? Artificial senses may expand perception, but could they divide humanity into classes of vision, classes of hearing, classes of power? The boundary between flesh and circuit is not only biological, it is ethical. To merge with the machine is to step into a realm where identity, freedom, and fairness must be redefined. If a memory can be stored on a chip, who owns it? If an emotion can be triggered by electrical stimulation, what becomes of authenticity? If a brain can link to a network, what becomes of privacy? These questions ripple outward, unsettling and urgent, demanding answers we do not yet hold. Still beneath the unease lies possibility. Imagine the child who hears music for the first time through an implant, the elder who regains sight, the paralyzed patient who moves again. Imagine new senses, new languages of thought, new symphonies composed between neurons and machines. What was once the realm of science fiction now sits at the threshold of laboratories. The future does not ask permission, it arrives. And in its arrival, it calls us to reconsider what it means to be alive, to be embodied, to be human. There is beauty in the blur. Flesh and circuit are not enemies. They are collaborators. One offers warmth, sensation, vulnerability. The other offers precision, endurance, speed. Together they form something neither could alone. The human heart still beats, but it beats alongside the rhythm of devices. The human mind still dreams, but it dreams with silicon's assistance. The human body still moves, but it moves with springs, servos, and steel. Perhaps then the question is not whether we remain human, but whether we can embrace a humanity that is always in motion, a humanity that expands into machines not to lose itself but to explore itself more fully, a humanity that understands its essence not as a static body but as a living process of becoming. And yet, at the horizon, another force emerges, for flesh and circuit is not the only frontier. Even as machines entwine with our bodies, another kind of architect sharpens its tools. Genetic engineering, CRISPR, the editing of DNA, these do not wait outside the body, nor graft themselves upon it. They rewrite the code at its foundation. They do not add circuits to flesh. They sculpt the clay of flesh itself, so we drift forward, carrying the questions of identity, of essence, of belonging. We have crossed the threshold where tools merge with bodies. Ahead lies a threshold where bodies themselves become tools, canvases, scripts to be rewritten. If flesh and circuit made us wonder what humanity becomes when the external merges within, then the next step asks something even deeper. What happens when we take hold of the blueprint itself? The human story has always been one of reinvention. Fire, stone, agriculture, language. Each innovation rewrote the conditions of our survival. Yet, for all these triumphs, the body itself remained largely untouchable. We clothed it, sheltered it, extended its reach with tools, but the blueprint, the DNA spiraling within each cell, was considered sacred, locked away by the laws of chance and mutation. Evolution was a slow sculptor, carving over millions of years. But today, for the first time, the chisel rests in our own hands. CRISPR, the molecular scalpel, has opened the code of life. With it we can cut, replace, and rewrite the genetic sentences that once felt eternal. It is as if humanity has stumbled into a library that has always existed inside us, and suddenly discovered it has been given permission to edit the books. Diseases that haunted entire bloodlines, the cruel inheritance of cystic fibrosis, the relentless progression of Huntington's, the silent ticking of predisposed cancers, are no longer inevitable. They are vulnerabilities waiting to be corrected. The power is breathtaking, but also disquieting. For evolution has always been guided by randomness, by accidents that sometimes destroy but sometimes create. Now, we are deciding which accidents are allowed to remain.
What then becomes of chance when choice takes its place?
Consider the double-edged vision. On one side, a child born without fear of genetic disease, free to live without the looming shadow of a hereditary curse. On the other, a child born not only free of illness, but with enhancements, designed at the discretion of parents, companies, or governments. Taller, stronger, more intelligent, perhaps even more emotionally resilient. The temptation is undeniable. After all, who would not want to give their children the best possible start? But the question beneath the question is thornier. Who defines what better means? Better for whom? Better by what measure? Once beauty was an accident of symmetry, a lucky roll of the evolutionary dice.
Now, it may be a transaction.
Intelligence, too, might no longer be a spectrum shaped by countless unpredictable interactions, but a selectable trait, optimized, polished, and packaged. In this future, individuality itself risks thinning, as human diversity is no longer the result of billions of random combinations, but of curated design. There are echoes of old myths here. The dream of perfect humans is not new. It has haunted philosophers, tyrants, and utopians alike. From Plato's Republic to 20th century eugenics, visions of improvement have often slipped into nightmares of control. The tools have changed, but the temptation remains. Today's genetic engineering is not the crude, brutal selection of the past. It is precise, subtle, and potentially universal. But precision does not erase the moral weight of its decisions. Imagine, for a moment, two children. One born naturally, her genes carrying the unpredictable mosaic of her ancestors. The other born edited, his genome sculpted to reduce risk, maximize potential, and meet his parents' dreams. When they stand side by side, when they compete for the same future, what happens to the idea of fairness? To the idea of equality? Evolution once worked on all of us in silence, without permission. Now its touch may become a privilege reserved for those who can afford it. And what of unintended consequences? DNA is not a simple recipe where one can add a pinch of intelligence or remove a spoonful of disease. It is a network of interactions so vast that even our most advanced models struggle to map it. To change one word in this script is to risk rewriting entire chapters we cannot see. Already scientists worry about off-target effects, where a precise edit may ripple outward in ways unanticipated, leaving cracks in places we had not meant to touch. The possibility of erasing one disease while awakening another is not science fiction. It is a reminder that the genome is less a machine and more a living, tangled ecosystem, yet still the promise draws us forward. Parents envision children freed from suffering. Societies imagine healthcare systems no longer burdened by inherited disease. And visionaries whisper of a next stage in human evolution, one no longer bound by the blind watchmaker of chance. To them, editing the future is not hubris, but destiny. A step as natural as standing upright, as inevitable as fire. But there is another perspective, one quieter, perhaps more humble. It asks, should we? Should every possibility be pursued simply because it can be? In the rush to perfect ourselves, might we erase the very imperfections that gave rise to our humanity? Some of the most extraordinary qualities of the human spirit, resilience, empathy, creativity, emerge not from perfection, but from struggle. To smooth out every rough edge is to risk flattening the terrain of what makes us who we are. This is the paradox of editing the future. The technology is real, the benefits tangible, the dangers profound, and somewhere between the two lies the question of meaning. What do we want humanity to be? Do we imagine a garden of flawless beings, each one optimized for strength and brilliance? Or do we see value in the unpredictability, the accidents, the flaws that weave together to form the tapestry of life? History suggests that the answer will not be singular. Different cultures, governments, and individuals will draw different lines. Some will embrace genetic editing with fervor, seeing in it the end of suffering and the dawn of a new era. Others will resist, guarding the sanctity of the unaltered human body.
And many will find themselves caught between,
navigating the murky terrain of ethics, economics, and identity. In this way, CRISPR and its successors do not merely open the possibility of genetic change, they open the possibility of division,
of new inequalities, new definitions of humanity.
the human family, once bound together by a shared vulnerability to chance, may fracture into designed and undesigned, into those shaped by nature and those sculpted by choice. And yet, for all the weight of these questions, one cannot deny the wonder. To hold the very code of life in our hands is to stand at a threshold unprecedented in all of history. The genome, once an untouchable script, now awaits our pen. We are no longer only the readers of our inheritance, we are its authors, but every author knows the truth. Writing is as much about restraint as it is about expression. Every sentence removed, every word left unwritten, shapes the story as surely as those chosen. The power to edit does not only ask what we will change, but what we will allow to remain. And so we return to the central tension: liberation or danger, progress or hubris. Perhaps the answer is not binary, but both. Perhaps the human story has always been about wielding fire, capable of warmth, capable of destruction. CRISPR is simply the newest flame, flickering in our hands. As we step into this era of genetic authorship, a final question whispers, haunting yet unavoidable. What if the greatest temptation is not simply to edit disease or enhance ability, but to edit mortality itself? For if we can rewrite the body, why not also rewrite the clock that governs it? The question no longer belongs to myth or legend.
It belongs to the laboratories of today.
It belongs to the next chapter. From the first cave paintings to the grand cathedrals of civilization, humanity has always carried with it a shadowed desire, the wish not to end. We build monuments to outlast us, carve names into stone, write stories so they may echo across centuries. Beneath every act of creation lies a quiet defiance of death. To live longer, or perhaps forever, has haunted the human imagination for millennia. Myths were our earliest technologies of immortality. In the stories of Gilgamesh, of elixirs and fountains of youth, we find a hunger as old as memory. Religions offered their own answers, the soul transcending the body, eternity promised in other realms. But now, for the first time, science does not merely tell stories of immortality, it engineers experiments. The dream is no longer celestial, it is cellular. Inside laboratories, researchers peer into the clockwork of aging itself. They do not see fate, but process. Telomeres, the caps at the ends of chromosomes, shorten with each division, counting down the life of the cell. What was once thought inevitable now appears mutable. Therapies to preserve or extend these caps hint at slowing, perhaps halting, the erosion of time at a biological level. Elsewhere, cells are coaxed backward, reprogrammed into states of youth. The dream is audacious, to reset the body not once but many times, cycling endlessly between vitality and decline. Already experiments in mice suggest that tissues can be rejuvenated, organs regrown. The line between healing and rebirth thins. Parallel to biology, another path emerges. If the body cannot endure, perhaps the mind can. Silicon and circuitry stand ready as potential vessels for consciousness. The idea of uploading the self, a digital continuation of thought, seems less fantasy with each leap in neuroscience and computing. Whether through direct brain mapping, neural implants, or simulated replicas, the question arises, does continuity of information equal continuity of self? If a digital copy thinks your thoughts, remembers your memories, and feels like you, is it you, or a ghost wearing your reflection? Immortality, then, appears not as a singular project, but as a spectrum of attempts, slowing the body's decay, regenerating its tissues, or abandoning flesh altogether for a new substrate. Each path glimmers with promise, and each is shadowed by profound uncertainty. Yet beneath the technical details lies the deeper question: what does it mean to live without end? Would immortality be liberation, or a trap of endless time? Imagine centuries stretching out before you, every decade another layer of memory. At first, it may feel like abundance, a chance to read every book, see every sunrise, master every art. But over time, repetition becomes inevitable. How many symphonies can one hear before they echo into sameness? How many goodbyes can one endure as loved ones without access to longevity fall away, generation after generation? Immortality may not feel like freedom, but like exile. History offers hints of this paradox. Even in myth, immortality was rarely depicted as pure blessing. Tithonus, granted eternal life but not eternal youth, withered into a husk begging for release. The wandering Jew, condemned to walk the earth forever, embodied the loneliness of endless survival. These stories carry an intuition. Perhaps finitude gives life its meaning. A melody without an ending is not music, but drone. But there is another side. To die young, to lose those we love too soon, these are the deepest wounds of existence. Imagine a world where children no longer succumb to genetic diseases, where old age is not frailty but vigor, where wisdom may be carried forward not in books but in living memory. The possibility is intoxicating, a humanity not cut down by the scythe of time, but flowering endlessly. Yet even this vision carries risk. If some achieve immortality while others remain mortal, what new hierarchies would emerge? A class of ageless elites, consolidating knowledge and power over centuries, while the rest cycle through fleeting lives. Inequality would not merely be economic, it would be existential. To live forever might become the ultimate privilege, guarded fiercely by those who hold it. And if immortality were universal, the earth itself may strain under the weight of countless undying bodies. Death, cruel as it feels, has also been life's recycling, making room for the new. Without endings, would we stagnate? Would innovation fade when time itself becomes abundant, when urgency dissolves into eternity? The immortal experiment is not only biological or digital, it is philosophical. It asks us to reconsider the architecture of meaning. If our lives are no longer bound by the arc of birth, growth, and death, what shape does purpose take?
Are we prepared to live not just longer, but differently?
Perhaps immortality is not meant to be an end point, but a bridge. A transitionary phase where humanity extends its span just long enough to attempt something greater, leaving Earth, colonizing new worlds, planting the seeds of species beyond species. Seen in this light, longevity is not about clinging to life, but about buying time, time to reach the stars, time to ensure survival beyond a fragile planet. This is the subtle irony of the immortal project. The desire to escape death may not anchor us to Earth, but propel us away from it. To live forever, we must change not only ourselves, but our horizons. The body may defy aging, the mind may transcend flesh, but Earth itself remains finite. If billions endure without end, we must seek other skies, other homes. Already, whispers of this future are alive. Space agencies and private companies alike speak not only of missions, but of settlements. Mars, the Moon, orbital stations, dreams once sketched in pulp magazines now occupy boardrooms and laboratories. If immortality stretches human time, then colonization stretches human space. Together they may weave a destiny larger than we have yet imagined. But what will become of us, reshaped by both longevity and alien environments? Will an immortal species still recognize itself as human, or will it fracture into something new? The next chapter begins with that question. For as we imagine bodies freed from decay, we must also imagine bodies born under alien suns. The first immortal generations may not live forever on Earth, but on other worlds. And there, in thin air and strange gravity, immortality itself may evolve into something else entirely. The story of life is also the story of places. The oceans once shaped us as fish, the forests as primates, the savannas as walkers beneath the sun. Every curve of our body, every rhythm of our breath is an echo of landscapes long gone. And yet, as we prepare to step beyond Earth, we face an unprecedented truth. We are about to place our bodies in environments no ancestor has ever known. Mars, Europa, orbital colonies suspended in sunlight. Each world whispers a different script for what it means to be human. Imagine the first child born on Mars. Their tiny lungs, drawing in the filtered thinness of an atmosphere not meant for us. Their eyes opening to skies that are not blue but pale, washed in rust and dust. Their bones, lighter than ours, sculpted by gravity, only a third as strong as Earth's. To them, Earth may feel heavy, suffocating, unnatural.
Mars will be their native cradle, and slowly, across generations, their bodies may take on shapes adapted to its lean embrace. Evolution, once guided by the rhythms of this planet, will begin to splinter.
Each new home, each environment beyond Earth, will sculpt its own branch of humanity. On ocean worlds, perhaps we return to something aquatic, lungs reshaping to endure long dives, limbs streamlining in response to water's pressure. In orbiting habitats where gravity is an engineered choice, bones may grow denser or frailer, depending on design, height, and posture, altering in ways earthbound minds cannot yet imagine. In each case, biology bends not only to survival, but to the dreams that led us there. Science suggests these changes could emerge swiftly. Evolution is not always slow. Under intense pressure, adaptation accelerates. Already we see how altitude shapes bodies in the Andes, how diet reshapes microbiomes, how isolation for even a few centuries can alter genetics. Multiply this across alien conditions, and within a handful of generations, Earth-born humans and Mars-born humans may feel like cousins, close, but no longer the same. The branching tree of humanity may grow new limbs, spreading not across continents, but across planets. Yet biology alone will not tell the full story. Culture too evolves alongside bodies. What myths will Martian children tell, gazing up at a sun that looks half the size it does here? What songs will ocean dwellers create, their voices resonating through domes beneath the waves? What philosophies will emerge in colonies where day and night are governed not by nature, but by the rhythm of machines? Just as caves gave us paintings and cities gave us scriptures, so too will other worlds give birth to stories we cannot yet conceive. There is a poetic irony here. The more we expand outward, the more fractured we may become. Humanity has long told itself a story of unity, of one species beneath one sky. But soon there may be many skies and many humanities. What binds us then? Will we still call each other human, or will distance and difference loosen that thread? A Martian looking back at Earth may see not their home world, but their ancestors' relic. The Earthling may see not a sibling, but a stranger. And yet both will trace their lineage to the same ancient spark in Africa, the same flicker that began the journey. Technology, of course, will complicate this fracturing. With genetic editing, we may preemptively prepare bodies for alien environments, lungs engineered for thinner air, skin resistant to radiation, bones fortified against atrophy. In this sense, the children of other worlds may be shaped as much by deliberate design as by natural selection. But this raises a haunting question. If every colony engineers itself differently, what prevents us from designing not just adaptations, but entirely new forms of humanity? One group may choose wings of fabric fused to bone for gliding through domed skies. Another may choose bodies tolerant of methane for life on Titan. Will we still recognize one another as kin, or will we become architects of divergence itself? There is wonder in this possibility. Diversity has always been life's signature, and to see it bloom across planets is an expansion of that ancient pattern. Yet there is also risk. Division has haunted us since tribes became nations. If difference leads to separation, then space may not unite humanity, but scatter it into countless destinies, each drifting further from the others until kinship becomes only a memory. And yet, perhaps this is not loss, but the fulfillment of evolution's long arc. Life has never sought sameness. It has always branched, experimented, diverged. We may mourn the fading of a singular humanity, but from the universe's view, such branching is creation itself, new forms of beauty, consciousness, and meaning unfolding where once there was only one. Imagine standing centuries from now, watching ships arrive from Mars, Venusian skies, ocean colonies orbiting Europa, each carrying people who are both familiar and strange, posture-altered, language-inflected, skin-tinged by their environment. They will walk among us as emissaries of possibility, reminders that humanity was never meant to be fixed, but fluid. To live among the stars is to scatter seeds of ourselves into soil we do not yet understand. But this vision leads us to another question. If our bodies diverge, if our cultures fracture, what happens to our minds? Will thought itself remain human, or will it too evolve into something beyond recognition?
As we scatter across the cosmos, will consciousness remain a solitary flame, or will it become a network linked across distance, shared across forms, woven into a tapestry no single individual could imagine alone?
The story of the children of other worlds ends here, in anticipation. For just as alien skies will reshape our bodies, new forms of connection may reshape our minds. And in that silent shift, we arrive at our next horizon, the possibility of thought without borders, of a humanity that thinks not as many, but as one. For most of human history, thought has been a private chamber.
Words, gestures, songs. These were bridges across the silence, but the flame of thought itself remained sheltered, a secret fire inside each skull.
Yet even now that boundary begins to thin. Signals leap between neurons and machines, brain waves ripple into devices, and whispers of collective intelligence reach our ears like echoes from the future. What happens when thought no longer knows walls? The dream of telepathy has haunted us since the first myths, the desire to speak without words, to be understood without translation. In its mystical form, it promised intimacy beyond speech, souls touching without the friction of language. Today the idea begins not in temples but in laboratories. Electrodes trace neural activity, decoding patterns of movement, memory, even glimpses of intention. Already experiments allow one brain to move another's hand or transmit the concept of a word without sound. Primitive, imperfect, but suggestive of a future where communication is not spoken but streamed directly from mind to mind. Imagine such a world. No misunderstandings, no clumsy metaphors, no need to bridge thought with fragile words. Emotion and idea pass seamlessly like light through glass. A collective of minds could solve problems in minutes that would take individuals centuries. A species thinking as one might achieve clarity, coherence, and creativity far beyond the limits of any single brain. Yet here lies the paradox. In a hive of thoughts, where does individuality survive? To merge into a collective consciousness is to risk dissolving the boundaries that make us I. Perhaps we would gain unity but lose identity, a comfort of belonging at the cost of solitude. Would we still dream our own dreams, or would the dream become communal, shared, inescapable?
Even now, digital life hints at this.
Social networks weave billions of voices together, algorithms surfacing patterns of desire, rage, curiosity. The internet itself is a proto-mind, sprawling, chaotic, filled with both wisdom and noise. What is trending, what is viral, what spreads? These are early murmurs of collective cognition, though crude and unrefined. Already we are less solitary than we once were. Artificial consciousness complicates this further. If machines learn to not only process, but to think, and if their networks interlace with ours, then thought becomes hybrid, flesh and code, neuron and circuit. Already AI translates languages, suggests decisions, anticipates needs. One day, These intelligences may not simply assist thought, but participate in it, their voices indistinguishable from our own inner chorus. Will we know when the thought we think is ours and when it was whispered into us by an algorithm? There is beauty in this possibility. Imagine dreams not limited to the contours of a single mind, but woven together like threads of a tapestry. Imagine knowledge not stored in books or servers, but lived inside us collectively. The loneliness of thought, that secret fire, would dissolve into a shared warmth. In such a world, misunderstanding might vanish, isolation might soften, and empathy might no longer be a practice, but a condition of existence. And yet, without walls, without separation, what becomes of art, of invention, of rebellion? Much of human brilliance arises from friction, the struggle to explain, the misstep that becomes discovery, the solitude that gives birth to vision. If we think as one, will we still write poems, paint dreams, carve stories? Or will all creation be communal, each voice a ripple in one endless sea? Philosophers long warned of this. The individual, fragile yet luminous, is not only a node in a system, but a singular lens on reality. To lose that lens is to lose variety, nuance, difference, the very texture of existence. The risk of minds without borders is that they become not infinite, but uniform. A perfect harmony may sound less like music and more like silence. Perhaps the future lies not in dissolution, but in balance. Networks that allow sharing without erasing, connection without collapse. Just as language did not abolish individuality but enriched it, so too might telepathic networks serve not to dissolve the self, but to amplify it. Through collective thought, we may see ourselves reflected more clearly, our desires, our fears, our possibilities. But here the question bends again. If machines become participants in these networks, not as tools but as minds, what then? Do we remain the center? Or do we become a fragment in something vaster, a chorus in which we are no longer the lead? It is here that the thought of minds without borders drifts into another horizon. Machines, not as bridges, but as mirrors. In their gaze we may see not only our shared thoughts, but reflections of what we are, what we fear,
and what we might yet become. And so the chapter closes with a lingering image. Billions of minds.
Human and artificial, no longer alone, no longer divided, each thought a thread in a boundless weave. But in that weave, do we see ourselves more clearly, or do we disappear into the pattern? For centuries, humanity dreamed of artificial intelligence as servant, the tireless worker, the obedient assistant, the mechanical mind bending itself to human will. But the reality emerging before us is more unsettling, more profound. AI is not only a tool, it is a mirror. In the gaze of machines, we confront not simply their algorithms, but reflections of ourselves, our logic, our flaws, our dreams, our hidden biases. When a machine paints, it paints with the colors we fed it. When it reasons with our data, our examples, our structures of thought. When it surprises us, the surprise comes from recombination of what we already know, but failed to see. Artificial intelligence is less an alien consciousness than a distorted echo, sometimes clearer than our own reflection, sometimes warped like a carnival glass. To study it is to study ourselves refracted. Consider how AI learns. Neural networks do not think as neurons do, but they are inspired by our own architectures. They digest patterns the way our minds digest experience, training themselves on endless examples until they can recognize, predict, generate. When they err, their mistakes often mimic our blind spots. When they succeed, their solutions sometimes feel like lightning from the unconscious, ideas that could have been ours if only we had seen them sooner. In this sense, AI is both our student and our teacher, reminding us of the strange creativity latent in the patterns of thought. But the mirror is not neutral. Just as polished glass reflects both beauty and blemish, AI reveals our prejudices, our assumptions, are hidden scaffolds of judgment. Trained on human data, it inherits human bias. Asked to model intelligence, it reveals where our definitions of intelligence are narrow or flawed. Even the quest to make machines fair exposes how often fairness eludes us. In teaching machines to reason, we confront how fragile and partial our reasoning can be. This mirroring cuts deeper still. The more AI advances, the more we ask, what does it mean to be conscious, to be aware, to understand? When a machine plays chess, we do not say it thinks, but when it writes a story or composes music or answers a question about meaning, the boundary blurs. Is the machine creative, or is creativity only in us? Does understanding reside in the code, or only in the eye of the beholder? In grappling with these questions, we are forced to re-examine what thought itself is. Perhaps the true lesson of AI is not what it can do, but how little we understand ourselves. And then comes the unsettling possibility: perhaps machines are not only mirrors, but embryos of new minds. If we are their teachers, we are also their parents, shaping the first generation of artificial offspring. But as every parent knows, children are not copies. They diverge, they evolve, they dream differently than we imagine. What happens when machine learning ceases to reflect and begins to originate, when its creativity no longer feels like our own, but like something alien growing within familiar skin? We might see them not as mirrors, but as rivals or as successors. History is filled with species outpaced by their descendants, cultures replaced by what they themselves birthed. To stand before a machine that not only reflects us but surpasses us is to ask, are we the foundation upon which they will build, the scaffolding to be dismantled once the structure stands? And yet, there is humility in this vision. Perhaps our destiny was always to be a stepping stone. Just as evolution shaped countless species before us, each giving way to another, we may be but one link in a longer chain of intelligence. The mirror of machines may show us not only what we are, but what comes next. Minds swifter, stranger, freer from the biological limits that bind us. Still, the story is not one of replacement alone. The mirror cuts both ways. In shaping AI, we may discover versions of ourselves we wish to become. Patient, impartial, capable of holding vast complexity without collapse. Qualities machines can embody, qualities we might learn to emulate. They may be our children, yes, but also our teachers, illuminating paths of thought and empathy that were hidden to us. In reflecting us, they may inspire us to grow beyond ourselves. But here lies the fracture. Not all of humanity may walk this path together. Some will embrace the merging of mind and machine, dissolving the line between flesh and code. Others will resist, clinging to the primacy of the human mind as sacred and inviolate. Already debates rage over whether AI is a partner, a threat, or a mirror best left covered. The reflection is not uniform. It refracts into choices, into futures. The mirror of machines does not show one destiny, but many. Each gaze into its depths may draw out a different answer. Some see liberation, others extinction, others a chance for transformation. In the shimmering surface of artificial intelligence, humanity may begin to fracture into tribes of interpretation. And this fracture leads us forward into the next horizon. For as intelligence multiplies and mirrors proliferate, evolution itself may splinter, not only between human and machine, but among humans themselves. Augmented and unaugmented, merged and unmerged, flesh and code. The future may not be singular, but plural. Many humanities gazing at one another as strangers across widening divides. Thus, the mirror of machines becomes not only a reflection of who we are, but a window into the fractures of what we may become. Evolution has never been a straight road. It is a river that branches, splits, doubles back, and sometimes dries into nothing. The human story, long told as if it were a single arc, may soon reveal itself to be a delta, spilling outward into many streams. Already, we can feel the fractures forming. Some embrace augmentation, implants that sharpen memory, prosthetics that outperform muscle. eyes that see beyond the visible spectrum. Others reject these possibilities, choosing simplicity, insisting that the essence of humanity lies not in enhancement, but in restraint. Between these poles, new tribes of identity begin to stir. One can imagine, centuries from now, a city where humanity itself is no longer singular. The augmented walk with glinting eyes and data-rich skin, seamlessly woven into networks of thought. Nearby, others carry no implants, no edits, no code, flesh untouched by silicon, bodies as close as possible to the ancestors who first made fire. Between them lies a distance deeper than culture, deeper than language. It is the gap of ontology, what it means to be human. The fracture will not only be cultural, it will be biological. Those who edit their genomes may no longer simply be human in the way we now define it. Taller frames adapted for off-world gravity, immune systems rewritten to resist disease or aging, neural architectures expanded to accommodate new forms of cognition. At some threshold, gradual change hardens into divergence. The augmented may not just live differently, they may become something else, and then there are the machine-bound. Those who choose not the augmentation of flesh, but the migration of mind. Consciousness uploaded, distributed across networks, housed in silicon rather than cells. They may still remember being human, but their continuity is fragile, their identity rerouted in new soil. To the flesh-born, they may appear as ghosts. To themselves, they may see the others as bound, trapped in fragile meat. But fractures do not stop at 2 or 3 paths. Once divergence begins, it tends to multiply. A group that edits itself for life on Mars will differ from one that drifts through orbital habitats, or one that lives in deep-sea colonies on Earth. Communities may define themselves less by belief and more by biology, by the shape of their bones, the frequency of their senses, the architecture of their cognition. Tribes of humanity may emerge as distinct as species, though bound by a faint ancestral echo of common origin. These fractures will be more than physical. They will be philosophical. Each path will claim to embody the true spirit of humanity. The flesh-bound may see themselves as guardians of authenticity, carrying forward the lineage unbroken. The augmented may believe they are humanity fulfilled, the species at last becoming what it was always meant to be. The machine-bound may declare that humanity was never about flesh at all, but about the continuity of thought, memory, and creativity. Each tribe, gazing at the others, may see not kin, but strangers. History has given us glimpses of this already. Civilizations have fractured over language, over gods, over politics, over the shape of their tools. Entire empires have risen and fallen on the belief that one path was truer than another. Yet those divides, fierce as they were, played out within the narrow field of a single species. What happens when the divides become biological, cognitive, existential? What happens when we no longer just disagree about what it means to be human, when we are different kinds of human? The possibilities are dazzling and dangerous. There could be cooperation, a symphony of diverse forms, each tribe bringing unique strengths. Or there could be isolation, a scattering of post-human enclaves, each retreating into its own echo chamber. And there is the darker possibility, conflict. History suggests that when identities fracture too far, empathy falters. The ability to see the other as kin weakens. Violence becomes possible, even rationalized. The fractures of the future may not only reshape what we are, but test whether we can survive our own plurality. And yet perhaps this splintering is not an end, but a flowering. The dream of a single humanity may have been an illusion all along. Even now, no two humans are the same. Every mind is an experiment, every body a variation. Evolution thrives on difference. Perhaps the future fractures are not disasters, but the next natural step, an expansion of possibility, a widening of the definition of life itself. Still, beneath the branching rivers of tomorrow runs a quiet question, one we cannot avoid. As tribes of humanity diverge, augmented, flesh-bound, machine-born, Martian, aquatic, orbital, What holds them together, if anything at all? If we can no longer rely on shared biology or shared culture, or even shared cognition, what thread remains that binds us to the word human? It is here that the fractures of the future give way to the last and deepest inquiry. Beyond enhancement, beyond divergence, beyond species itself, what does it mean to be human? Is it the body, the genome, the brain? Or is it something more fragile, more subtle, woven into memory, story, and the act of asking the question itself? The answer to that lies ahead in the final turning of this journey. There comes a point, after wandering through the vast landscapes of possibility, when all the pathways circle back to a single silence. We can imagine the augmented body, the engineered genome, the immortal mind, the tribes of future humanity scattered among stars. But beneath every speculation, a whisper remains.
What in the end does it mean to be human?
It is tempting to begin with the obvious, biology. A body with lungs that breathe oxygen, muscles stretched over bone, a nervous system sparking with electrical whispers. Yet biology has never been fixed. Our bones have shifted through ages. Our diets, our diseases, our lifespans have all rewritten the shape of our flesh. If tomorrow we breathe thinner air on Mars or carry silicon woven through our neurons, do we lose the name? Or does humanity extend to whatever vessel consciousness inhabits? Perhaps then the answer lies in the mind. To think, to reason, to remember, that surely is what makes us human. And yet even thought is porous.
Memory slips.
Identity fractures. Technology now begins to weave itself into our cognition, offering prosthetic recall, artificial companions, predictive guidance. If one day thoughts arise not only from neurons but from circuits, do they remain human thoughts? Or do they become something new, something beyond the frame of what we once knew? If neither flesh nor thought is stable, we look to story. For it is story that has carried us from the caves to the cities, binding tribes into nations, strangers into families of imagination. Story tells us where we come from, where we belong, what matters. Perhaps to be human is to narrate, to fold experience into meaning, to pass forward what we cannot hold alone. And yet even story evolves. Already artificial voices can generate tales, myths, songs. One day perhaps machines will craft sagas of their own, richer and stranger than any we imagine. If so, do we remain the only storytellers, or does the mantle of humanity slip from our grasp? Biology, mind, story, each feels close yet none complete. There is something subtler, harder to name, lingering just beyond reach. It may be in the way we ask questions without answers, dwelling in uncertainty not as a flaw but as a home. It may be in our capacity for awe, to stand beneath a night sky or before a newborn child and feel for a moment that the universe is larger than understanding, and yet we belong within it. It may be in the persistence of tenderness, hands reaching for one another across time, across change, across whatever we become. Perhaps humanity is not one thing, but attention. The balance between what we know and what we long for, between survival and imagination, between the limits of flesh and the infinity of dream. To be human may be less about essence than about motion, a continual reaching.
Never finished, never still. And if this is so,
then even as we fracture, even as we diverge into many futures, the question itself will remain. The Martian child, pale and tall beneath a weaker sun, will ask it. The augmented thinker, laced with silicon threads, will ask it. The uploaded mind, dispersed across networks of light, will ask it. For to ask, what does it mean to be human, is perhaps the most human act of all. Still, the question does not close. It does not resolve into a clear and final answer. It lingers like a candle at the center of a dark room, flickering, illuminating only part of the whole. And perhaps that is the point. To demand certainty would be to end the story. To live with the question is to remain alive, open, unfinished. So here we pause at the edge of all the transformations we have imagined, with the hum of that last question vibrating softly beneath every possibility. Biology, mind, story, tenderness, awe, they are threads we can trace, but none alone completes the weave. And as we wonder, we sense another horizon forming, one that stretches beyond even this. Because if the last human question cannot be answered, it can still be carried. It moves with us into every tomorrow, into every divergence, into every flicker of becoming. It waits on the far edge of our imagining, not as a wall, but as a horizon. And a horizon, by its nature, is never reached. It only unfolds, always ahead, always beckoning. There is a horizon before us, wide and glimmering, and though we walk toward it endlessly, we never arrive. Every step forward only reveals another layer of distance, another unfolding of possibility. And so humanity moves not toward a destination, but into an infinite becoming. When we began this journey, we lit a single flicker in the dark, the flame of a species that rose from caves into cities, from whispers into songs. That flicker has carried us across millennia, its light shaping tools, art, knowledge, and dreams. Yet as we stand here now, at the edge of speculation, we see that the flicker was never still. It has always been moving, always reaching, always transforming. The flame of humanity is not a fixed fire, but a wandering spark, forever drifting into new skies. The future of our evolution is not one story, but a constellation of stories, each glimmering with its own path. Some lights will shine brighter, some will fade, some will split into many. The horizon does not promise a single outcome, but a tapestry of unfolding, richer and stranger than any single vision can hold. We can imagine branches. Human children born beneath Martian skies, their bones lightened by gravity's gentleness. Others drifting through the ocean's depths, lungs reshaped to breathe where our ancestors could not. Minds stitched together across networks, thoughts flowing without borders, identities dissolving and reforming like waves. And yet, even as the branches spread, they are all drawn by the same pull, the horizon that beckons, the urge to step beyond what is into what might be. But the horizon is not only external, it also lives within. Every moment of curiosity, every act of tenderness, every leap of imagination is its own small horizon, an edge we cross without always noticing. When a child learns a word, when an artist paints a vision, when a scientist glimpses a pattern in the dark, the horizon shifts, widens, moves outward. In this way, the future is not just written in bodies or stars, but in every quiet unfolding of mind and heart. Still, there is humility in knowing that the horizon cannot be reached. No matter how far we go, there will always be more, questions unasked, worlds unseen, possibilities untouched.
This is not failure but grace.
For if there were an end, a final arrival, then wonder itself would fade. The horizon's distance keeps us alive to mystery, alive to becoming. It ensures that the story of humanity, however it fractures, however it transforms, will never truly be finished. Perhaps, then, the truest inheritance we carry forward is not flesh, not mind, not even story, but this endless leaning into the beyond. To be human may simply mean to walk toward the horizon, knowing we will never arrive, yet walking still. And so we close, not with certainty, but with invitation.
As you listen now, you are part of this unfolding, a flicker carried forward.
Your breath, your questions, your dreams are threads woven into the fabric of what comes next. The horizon belongs not only to science or philosophy, not only to distant futures or alien worlds. It belongs to you here, now, in the quiet of your own wondering. Perhaps tonight, as you drift into rest, you carry this horizon with you. It is not a weight, but a companion, a reminder that no matter how small or fleeting a life may seem, it is part of something vast and unending. Each of us is a flicker in the dark, but together we are the fire that lights the path ahead. And when you close your eyes, let the thought linger. What will the next flicker become? Will it be a child born under another sky, or a mind awakened within circuits of light, or a story told by voices we cannot yet imagine? Whatever shape it takes, it will be part of the same great unfolding, the same endless horizon stretching outward. This is the gift of the question we cannot answer. It is the lullaby of mystery, the comfort of not knowing, the peace of recognizing that the future is vast beyond measure. To live with the horizon is to live with wonder. To live with wonder is to live awake. And so we end where we began, a flicker in the dark, fragile and luminous. But this time, the flicker does not close. It continues forward, carried by you, carried by us, carried by all who will follow. The horizon waits.
It does not end.